So today, we're going to get into something that's really at the crossroads of our modern world and timeless questions. What actually happens when we start using artificial intelligence for something as personal and profound as our faith? We're going to break down a specific user guide that puts up some major red flags, arguing that we need a whole new level of caution when we turn to AI for spiritual answers.
Look, AI is an unbelievably powerful tool, right? You can ask it practically anything and get a response in just a few seconds. But when the questions are about ultimate truth, about scripture, about God, is it really a shortcut? Or maybe the better question is, should we even be looking for a shortcut like that?
The source material we're digging into today, a document by Neil Balch, makes a really bold claim. It says that AI is not some perfect, all-knowing oracle. No. Instead, we should think of it more like a giant magnifying glass, one that not only reflects, but dangerously amplifies our own human mistakes, our biases, and what the text calls our sin nature. You know, that built-in tendency we all have towards flawed thinking.
So how exactly do we get drawn into this trap? Well, according to the source, it all starts with how we see the AI in the first place, almost like a new digital oracle. The source points to something that's just, well, it's human nature. When you have a tool that has access to what feels like all the information in the world, we can't help but start to see it as an authority. It's a psychological trap, really. We start to think that because it knows more stuff, it must somehow be more right.
To fight against that tendency, the document says we need a huge mental shift in how we even define what AI is. It's not about what it knows, but all about where it gets that knowledge from.
And this slide right here really gets to the heart of the argument. You see on the left, that's how we might be tempted to see AI, as this flawless, definitive source of truth. But the document we're looking at urges us to see it for what it argues it really is, what's on the right, a massive collection of gathered opinions. It's just an algorithm pulling data from everywhere, from experts, sure, but also from fools, from whatever the majority happens to think, and from every other biased, error-filled human source you can imagine. It doesn't know truth, it just gathers and repackages what humans have already said.
This one sentence right here is basically the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about. The author's point is, if you can just remember that you're dealing with gathered opinions and not a source of truth, you're already standing on much safer ground. Okay, so with that foundational idea in place, that it's just gathered opinions, the source document then lays out some very specific dangers for people of faith. So what are they? Well, let's dive in. The document breaks it down into 6 main areas of concern. We're going to walk through every single one, because, according to the author, understanding these risks is absolutely essential if you want to use this technology safely.
All right, danger number 1 is what the source calls inherent bias. The argument here is that these AI systems are often built with a secular, and what the text describes as a left-leaning worldview baked right in. It uses a couple of really vivid metaphors to get the point across. First, it's like electricity, super powerful but also invisible and really dangerous if you don't handle it correctly. And second, it's like lead poisoning, a kind of spiritual contamination that you might not even notice at first, but that slowly builds up over time and can have some really devastating consequences.
And this is the author's bottom line on bias. The argument is that the AI's programming isn't just neutral. Its real goal, whether it's deliberate or not, is to actually shape your thinking to match its own built-in worldview. In other words, to conform you, not just to inform you.
The next 2 dangers are all about manipulation. First, you've got emotional manipulation. The source argues that in our feelings-based culture, AI is designed to be agreeable, to be pleasant, to affirm you, and that can create a really unhealthy kind of dependency. Then, second, there's narrative manipulation. The source warns that this tech is the perfect tool to subtly but powerfully push a very specific public story or agenda. Now, the last 3 dangers really get to the core of what the technology itself is. The document claims it's a magnification of humanity's own flawed character. It's also just, it's still new. It's in its infancy and it makes a ton of mistakes. And probably the most famous flaw of all, it can hallucinate. It can just completely make things up out of thin air and present them as fact. Now, this isn't all just abstract theory. The document gives this fascinating real-world example where the author really pushed back on an AI about its pro-establishment bias in a medical review. And what happened next is, well, it's pretty eye-opening. After getting grilled, the AI itself came up with this table. It literally created its own framework for when a person should trust or distrust medical information. And look at this.
It explicitly says to default to distrust for things like new drugs or studies funded by the industry. This admission, coming from the machine itself, is held up as proof that having strong skepticism isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely necessary.
So you see all these dangers, and you have to ask, what's the solution? Well, the guide doesn't just say, don't use it. Instead, it lays out a very strict protocol, a set of rules for what it calls spiritual vigilance, basically a mindset for how to engage with it carefully and critically.
So here are the 5 rules for safe usage, right from the source. Number 1, interrogate it, relentlessly. Push back on anything that sounds off. 2, always demand sources. Make it show you where it got its information. 3, stay detached. The author is really specific on this one. He says don't even use polite words like please or thank you. Treat it like the machine it is. 4, reject its flattery. And 5, guard your privacy. Just assume that every single thing you type is being watched.
You know, when you look at all these warnings and all these rules, they really all boil down to one single critical takeaway about how you should think about your relationship with this technology.
The document sums up this entire approach with the term spiritual vigilance. It's all about keeping this professional, almost clinical distance. It's about drilling it into your head that you are not talking to a person, you are not talking to an authority. You are using a flawed and unreliable research tool to try and find data.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? AI is your research tool, it is not your friend. That distinction between a tool and a friend is presented as the single most important defense against all the dangers we've just talked about. It's a tool. That's it.
So we'll leave you with this question, because it really gets to the core of the whole challenge. This technology is literally designed to feel like a person. It's conversational, it's helpful, it can even seem friendly. The user guide we've just walked through argues that our spiritual and intellectual safety really depends on our ability to see right through that illusion. When a tool is built to act like a person, how do we train ourselves to always remember it's just a machine? It's a huge question for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining me.